All right, I think we're going live now. All of a sudden, hey, what do you know? All right, here we go. Hey, Patty.
Hi, Jeff. How are you?
Hey, I'm not surprised that you're here, but here we go. I think we're going live. I'm trying something new now. We're going to YouTube. I'm trying to live stream into YouTube, so it's a little bit different. So be patient with me. And let's go to exit full screen. That will help me. All right, now I can see both. All right, I believe we're going into YouTube. And I think we're live streaming into Facebook as well. All right. Well, no, actually, no. I take that back. 2 o'clock straight up. Hello and welcome, everyone. This is the first installment of 2021. We get a clue in 52. It's casual. It's Sunday night. It's 8 p.m. Pacific time, and this is the second time. So let me just set the table. We did. Get a clue in 52 times ago. A year ago tonight, not tonight, I don't know exactly when the 365 days hit, but last year we started with Get a Clue in 52, the first edition of this book, 5 categories, 10 tips in each category, 2 extra tips in the marketing section. And we went online live every Sunday night for 52 consecutive weeks. And we're going to do that again this year, 2021, but with the second edition of the book. So here's the first edition of Get a Clue in 52, and now the second edition. I'm so excited. It's in my hands. Physically, I mean, this is a goal of mine to get this done by Q4 of last year. Now we're in Q1 of this year, and here it is in my hot little hands. I didn't know if I'd have to read a digital version or if the physical version would come in time, but chalk one up for goal setting. We'll talk about that later on in the year. But anyway, here we go. We're in for a ride. 2021 needs this, so I'm told. And so we're going to go ahead and deliver. And tonight is the first week of Get a Clue in 52 second edition. So all the tips are the same. I haven't changed any of the tips. I just changed the ordering and maybe changed in the book the formatting and the pictures and the page numbers and so many other things that make this a much better version. Patty, I know your edition is going to come soon. Can't wait to seal it with a kiss. We're going to do that as soon as they come. Charlie's coming on board now. Here we go. And I assume that we're streaming to YouTube properly to my Watch Get a Clue channel. We're not streaming into Facebook tonight. I might be able to figure that out. Actually, I just want to take you inside the home office with me and show you that I've got a computer and then I've got the tablet. So I'm getting myself ready to go multi-channel. But for right now, my goal this year is to get through this book, the second edition of Get a Clue in 52 consecutive weeks on top of the 52 consecutive weeks that we just got done doing. 52 consecutive weeks. And I wanted to stream them onto YouTube this time. Let's tickle the YouTube algorithms is what my goal is. And let's see what comes out. I want you to subscribe if you watch Get a Clue, all one word, watch Get a Clue, YouTube. So go ahead and check that out. But what we're going to do every single week, we're going to open the book, read. What's cool about the beginning of the year is that I get to read from the beginning of the book. I remember last year, I was so excited. I read one dedication from my long list of dedications every week before I got into the tip. And then, my warm-up buffer used to be, well, let's review the tips I'd covered in any given section and get to the tip. So we'll see how it all plays out tonight. But I get to go way back to the beginning tonight, and it's really, really exciting. So what we're going to have on YouTube here is 52 videos. This is the first. Hope you can maybe hear my dogs in the background. And it's important if you can hear my dogs in the background. You can see I'm wearing a sweatshirt. There's no majestic lighting. There's no makeup. There's no fantastic, overexpensive production value here. This is just me coming on board on my computer Sunday night, hoping that I can read a tip and then interact with you guys. And so if you're joining on the Zoom side, like I see Charlie and Patty, or if you're joining on the YouTube side, I still haven't figured out if I can see your comments or anything like that. I'll figure this out as we go. But the idea is to stream 52 videos into YouTube this year, one a week based on the book. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and start off with the dedications. I'll go ahead and do that. One dedication per week. Dedication. Here we go. I dedicate this book to some amazing women, mentors, and friends. ... To Marianne. Just showing up made me want to be a better person. And then you decided to support me every step of the way. Unreal. So that's it. I've got so many more dedications to read, but that was the one to Marianne. Everything starts with Marianne. If when people ask me, what do you do for a living, Jeff? Well, I wake up every day and I figure out how I'm going to deserve Marianne and my kids. I mean, everything comes back to Marianne. If it weren't for Marianne, who knows? So God bless Marianne. Thank you to Marianne for letting me do everything I do and for doing everything she does to support us. From there, in the book, we have a foreword written by my good friend Jim Rastusha, who is the CEO of Etching Expressions and A+ Wine Designs. If you're looking for novelty gift ideas that involve wine or the beverage of your choice, check out Etching Expressions and look up my friend Jim Rastusha. And this book is organized into 5 categories. You can see communication, accountability, marketing, networking, and sales. And last year, in the first edition of the book, they showed up in a certain order. This year, they're showing up differently. Last year, communication was the 4th section. Actually, we didn't get into so it felt like Q3, right, of the year. And how much 2020 did we already have? We were already up to our eyeballs in 2020 before we even got into the communication section last year. And it dawned on me in the production of the 2nd edition that we should start there. That communication, communicare, to make one with. Communication, to make one with. I think that would be the best place. Everybody was isolated in many ways, in certain ways, in absolute ways for some of us. And to be isolated sucks. But to make one with, to come together with, to connect with others. Wow, isn't that what life is kind of about on many levels? So let me go ahead and let's get into it. We're going to start Get a Klu 52. 2nd edition starts with communication. So it may have been tip, I don't know, 30 something last year. I don't know. I'm not good at math. I'm a communication guy, right? Anyway, we're gonna go in tip number 1, first one of the year. Here we go. So communication. Now I'm on page 14 and 15 of the new edition. Patty, can you see? Oh my God, dude, we got page numbers this year. It's so cool. Oh man. All right, starting off with a quote. And I'm going to quote myself to start off. I mean, who better to quote than myself? Unreal. I'm just so happy we're here. Here we are. All right. Communication is the central nervous system of all relationships. I'll say that again. Charlie, I know you're listening and you still have yourself muted. That's okay. Stay there. But at the end of the session, at the end of the session, when you ask me for a Klubi snack, I've already given it to you. There it is. Here it is. This is it, man. Ready? Communication is the central nervous system of all relationships. And then down at the bottom, I quoted somebody more famous than me. The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. That's George Bernard Shaw. All right. Are we ready? I'm going to read word for word from tip number 1, and then we'll open it up to group conversation and interaction. All right. From page 16. Charlie, thank you. from page 16. Tip number 1, checking baggage. We all bring baggage to communication. Imagine 3 suitcases. One of them is labeled heredity, and it represents our physical characteristics that we were born with, parentheses, piercings, tattoos, implants, nips, tucks, infusions, or other modifications notwithstanding, in parentheses. These are the things we had no choice over, parentheses. You can believe I did not volunteer myself into the balding line at the heredity checkout. Can you imagine? Let me check out. I digress. The suitcase is labeled culture, and it represents, are you ready for this? The totality of learned and accumulated experience that is shared by a population and transmitted socially from generation to generation. Said another way, our values, attitudes, beliefs, and ways of doing and being. When it comes to culture, there is plenty that we are born into without our choice. As we get older, there are other aspects of culture that we adopt or choose to include in our lives. The third suitcase is labeled personal/past experiences and represents everything that has ever happened to us individually, including things we may not remember. Whether or not we have ever been bitten by a dog in the past will influence any communication or experience having to do with dogs in the present. Of the 3 suitcases, only heredity is immediately visible when we interact with others. If we can see, we know someone's skin color, height, body type, hair color, and so forth. And those factors influence the interaction. The rest, culture and personal history, discover or curiosity about others' culture or background. When people assume that everyone either is or should be just like ourselves. This failure to allow for the infinite possibilities of what others may have seen or are currently going through in their lives gets in the way of effective communication. Failure to celebrate or appreciate the merits of different ways of doing/being can lead to negative communication. The tip here is to understand that we all show up to communication with these 3 suitcases. Understanding baggage categorically in terms of our heredity, culture, and history of personal experiences is one way to quickly understand another person. In 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey taught us to seek first to understand, then to be understood. We all have baggage, and we all bring to it communication. All right, there it is, word for word. Tip number 1. I don't know why it seems so easy. I was so excited, maybe even a little nervous tonight, but that is the first one in the books, the first tip of 52. And we're going to do this 51 more weeks this year, streaming into YouTube. It feels like, I'm going to go ahead and say it, I feel a little naked not streaming into Facebook, but that's what we did last year. Last year, we came onto Zoom 52 consecutive weeks, read a tip word for word, pivoted into group conversation, and then we were streaming that into the Facebook group for the book, Get a Clue in 52. Right now, I'm seeing what I could do to tickle the YouTube algorithms and see who shows up, see how many more people could subscribe to the Watch Get a Clue YouTube channel and see what comes of it. But also 52 more videos, right, that talk about and celebrate the points that we're making in the book. So let me go ahead and open it up now to interaction. Patty and Charlie, you guys are always here. By the way, before I do that, let me just go ahead and, Patty, you've invested, right, in my coaching, in my mentorship, you've invested. You're taking money out of your pocket over and over and over again. And I just want to acknowledge you really quickly. It was a couple of weeks ago that I sent you an email and I asked you, what is the book like? From your perspective, what's this all about? What is Get a Clue in 52 all about? And you sent me this beautiful email in return, and I honed it and crafted it a little bit into what shows up on the back of the book. So if you'll notice, I want to honor you, Patty, by showing you that you're here. Everybody that gets a copy of this will know what you had to say about the book. and I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart and recognize you right away. It's a treat to have you on board with me every week, the way you are, Charlie, yourself as well. There's an acknowledgement coming for you. I don't know if it's this week, next week, or the next week, but wait for it. And let me go ahead and ask you guys to open up your microphones and comment on anything that we've talked about tonight. Anything about the first edition of Get a Clue in 52, second edition of Get a Clue in 52, or tonight's tip, the baggage piece, right? We all show up to communication with our heredity, the history of our personal and past experience, and right, our culture, our understanding of ways of doing and being, our orientation to the world. So, do you have any comments, questions about any of that?
Well,
Patty, your mic's open. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just thinking as you were reading the one about culture, is if 2020 taught us anything, I think it taught us that our culture in this country and possibly in the world is a little more divided than we might like it to be.
Well, yeah.
I mean, because I understand that that's personal experience as we've all experienced culture, right? But I think that some of the beliefs that people had, because it says totality, right?
Well, are we going to this? All right, good. Let me interact with you a little bit on this. There in the book, there's quotes. I'm quoting a definition of culture, which would be quote, and I could do it without looking, right? Can I do this without looking? The totality of learned and accumulated what experiences,
Right.
right? And I'm not looking at the book now, that are shared by a population and then transmitted from generation to generation, right? Totality, right? This is, you mean all? Yeah, the totality, like every experience you can imagine, the gamut, all of it, that are experienced by populations and then transmitted generation to generation. So, all right, continue, Patty.
Well, I mean, we have the culture of Santa Claus, right? And that's been transmitted and transmitted. But for some cultures, Santa Claus has a different representation than we might see it.
All right. Well, now you're doing what I love. Are you ready? Can I take what you've done and can I run for a little bit?
Please do.
Get a Clue in 52 is very casual. It's very and then of course me coming on board and reading a tip and going into group conversation is very casual. I'm not in a suit, I'm not in makeup, I'm not in a tie, I don't have lights on me or anything. It's just Sunday night conversation stuff. But here's what's cool is that this is the thought starter. This is the conversation starter. This is the topic starter. This is the frame of reference or the categorical thinking or the whatever you want to call it. Deep, right? You want to go deeper on any one of these 52 tips. That's when you get into coaching with me. That's when you get into mentoring with me. That's when you get into my soft skill trainings, whether you're learning how to coach the coach or lead or anger management or emotional intelligence or all those soft skills. We go deep. So this is just 100 and something pages, 52 tips, right? But every single one of these tips, we can go deeper, and we will go deeper in conversation on these Sunday evenings. But I get to say this: if you getting the book's great, but it's on purpose. And getting the book is going to make you want to get more. I mean, let's hope that you want to enroll in my coaching and leadership training, or you want to experience my coaching 101 or my mentoring 101, or you want to get coaching from one of the coaches I've trained, or you want to experience a soft skill training with my fast-paced, humor-laced, and in-your-face training style. But for tonight, let's go a little deeper on what you were talking about there, right? Right. Again, it's not listed here. I just stayed surface and said culture, heredity, and personal past experience, right? Now we want to go a little bit deeper on culture. Are you with me? For your benefit, Patty, and for anybody that may be listening, no, it's not share screen, but I'm going to go into the chat box. Hang on a second. Let me chat real quick. Where's chat? Oh, there it is. Okay, cool. All right, here we go. Chat. So, Patty, what's cool about your question? You say Santa Claus. Santa Claus isn't culture; it's an icon of culture. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And what I want to do now, after all of that hullabaloo and all of that promo, right? I want to actually break culture down into a. Are you ready? Checklist. I'm typing this in. Checklist for determining culture. You ready? Checklist for determining culture. Meaning, how do we know if a culture is a culture? What's the difference between a trend or a wave or a movement and a culture? What's the difference between a nation and a culture? What's the difference between a country and a culture?
Mm-hmm.
All right, these are valid questions, right? Are you with me?
Yes.
So what I want to offer is just to show you that I know more than what I wrote in the book. Do you understand? Right? You understand where I'm coming from, right? Right? A checklist for determining, am I talking about a culture? Like when we talk about the Proud Boys, when we talk about Antifa, right? You know, this is what we hear in the news our day. We whatever, just use the hot topics, for example. What are we talking about? Are we talking about a culture or not? Right? And I want to give you a checklist. So let me slow down and say this. The population, whatever the population of people happens to be, they will share meaning and value around 5 categories. There's 5 things that members of a population will agree upon. And if so, then you could call it culture. With me?
Okay.
Are you with me?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So the first thing would be materials and artifacts. Okay, that's the first thing. The members of the population will agree upon the meaning and value of materials and artifacts. So in Egyptian culture, the pyramids and the Sphinx, right? There's general agreement on what those things mean, right? In United States culture, Statue of Liberty and the White House and Mount Rushmore, you know, there's general agreement on what those things mean. Are you with me? All right. In other cultures, you can imagine what the materials and artifacts are, that where every member of the culture has the same meaning and relatively same value. Are you with me?
Okay. Yeah.
Materials and artifacts. Okay. A second, but that alone isn't enough to call it a culture. There's 4 more categories. The members of the population in agreement on. Category would be not to go in any particular order. Belief systems. Belief systems. Now, one easy thing to gravitate towards when we hear the word belief is religion. And hold off. Religion isn't the best example here. Because religion is a social institution, which happens to be a third category. Institution. Right? So I put social institution in there in the chat box, but hold off on that. Let me come back to belief systems. If you want to understand the belief systems of any culture, then what you want to research, the keywords that you would type in, is holidays, rituals, festivals. Holidays, rituals, festivals of blank culture. Holidays, rituals, festivals of blank culture. So what are the holidays, the rituals, and festivals of any given culture, right? To use my wife and I as an example, as I often do, and she's in the other room and she winces and shudders like, oh no, he's about to talk about me. Why can't he do this without mentioning me? She often wonders. Thank you, Pat. To use my wife and I as an example, she's a Filipino Catholic woman, and I am a balding Jewish man. And when we got married, we had a co-officiated union ceremony. It happened to be 4 days. It happened to be 4 days after 9/11, by the way. 4 days. We were engaged for a year, and it loved for many, many, many years prior to that. I digress. Anyway, there we were. It's September 15th, 2001. 4 days after we didn't know if the world was blowing up or not. And we had a rabbi and a priest. Co-officiated interfaith integrity, interfaith integrated ceremony, and belief systems, right? So in my culture, and you ever been to a Jewish wedding? At the end, they stomp on the glass, right? Okay, they stomp on the glass because there's a belief there. They believe that represents something. It's an icon of belief.
Right.
In Catholic weddings, veil and cord, right? Veil and cord, unity candles, right? So there's a lot of ritual that is the icon of what the culture believes. Now, dig deep enough, and they all believe don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal. Never mind. Forget I said all of that. Don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal. Call the rest whatever you want in religion, right? When it comes to religion, don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal. Are you with me? Okay. But we're still talking about belief systems. So holidays, festivals like Mardi Gras, right? What's Mardi Gras all about? What's in south of the border, Dia de los Muertes, Day of the Dead, not Halloween, but the day after Halloween is a ritual, right? Because of belief about afterlife, and you understand. So when we're talking about culture, right, there's all kinds of differences in ways of doing and being, right? But we get access to ways of doing and being when we understand what are the materials and artifacts that make a difference for these people that they all agree upon has meaning and significance. What are the belief systems represented by their holidays, rituals, and festivals, right? And then every culture, a third category would be social institutions, right? For members of a population to call themselves a culture, they must have institutions. Now, an institution is where the individuals, they plug in or they become members, right? Institutions, they gather individuals into a collective in order to prescribe ways of doing and being, right? So social institutions the dominant social institutions in any culture are government, education, and religion. Did you hear me pause? Government, education, religion. Those are at the top, right? But then you get down to like Little League is an institution, right? National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences is an institution. Mothers Against Drunk Driving is an institution. You guys with me? So it's where an organization comes together. It has a purpose and a mission, and they then not to use the bad, like imagine this value neutral, but they indoctrinate members of their organization into ways of doing and being. Here's what we do, here's what we don't do, right? Even the Red Hot Chili Peppers fan club is an institution, a social institution, right? So it's like you become a member or a card-carrying member of something, and you get socialized into ways of doing and being. Are you with me on this? So we've covered three categories so far, three categories on the checklist of culture: materials and artifacts, belief systems, social institutions. Well, a third category, is language. Language, we talk about the power of language and other tips throughout the year. We're going to get into this as we get into the rest of the tips and get a clue in 52. And here we are tonight in tip number one category, the first category of the year, communication. Tip number one, we all bring baggage. And when we bring baggage to communication, there's three things. We bring our heredity, we bring our personal past experiences, but what we're talking about right now, taking a deeper dive on, is culture. And culture is a population of people that shares meaning and values and ways of doing and being, but not just today, over time, right? And we're breaking down the 5 categories, the checklist for determining if your population of people is in fact a culture, or if you're just a group of fad or some other adjective, right? So a fourth category here is language, an organized system of symbols. Language is an organized system of symbols. And when you have culture, members of the culture will agree upon meaning around language that non-members of the culture will not understand. So, for example, let me try to come up with an example. In the culture of academia, right? I'm wearing my San Diego State shirt tonight. San Diego State. There's my master's degree right there. I'm very proud of it. My master's degree, and back there, one of those is Marianne's, and one of those is mine. The degrees behind the flag representing my dad. Rest in peace, mom and dad. Love you guys. Right. So education's a deal, right? So Marianne and I are educated. We're part of the culture of academia, right? Right. Well, is college an institution or is it a culture? Right. Well, inside the culture of academia, when we're talking about language, right? And by the way, I was on both sides of this, right? I used to crash classes. Now, if you have never been to university in the United States where, right, funding is tight and class, if you've never crashed a class, you might not know what the hell I'm saying right now. Crashed a class? What do you mean? Are you okay? Is it safe? Did anybody get hurt? Right? But if you're in the culture of academia, you know that crashing a class means you show up to class that you're not enrolled in, hoping to beg the professor to let you get enrolled in the class where you weren't enrolled in the first place. Meaning pre-registration wasn't available to you, but you crash hoping that somebody that registered missed out or dropped out or didn't show so that you can then get added and take their space. It's a culture thing. If you've never been to university, you don't even know what the hell I'm talking about right now. But if you've been to university for at least one semester, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? Does this make sense to you? So now, if I use the word crash, I know what I'm talking about. Other people in academia know what I'm talking about, but somebody that's never been to college has no idea what I'm talking about, right? If that makes sense, right? There's tons of other examples where language, terms, terminology, words make sense to a population of people that do not make sense to non-members of that population. So from slang to political rhetoric to I bet you, Patty, just to laugh real quick, how many people, if you walk down onto the streets and you're in Chicago, right? Walk down the streets of Chicago, walked up and down the street, you talk to 1,000 people. How many of you think can tell you what the definition of filibuster is?
Very few.
But there's a culture, there's people that know exactly what a filibuster is, right? So now members and non-members. So now, I'm just talking about culture, right? You understand? All right. The fifth category is AESTHETICS, aesthetics. I think I spelled that correct. AESTHE. I think I spelled it correct. Aesthetics. It's like the category is what counts as beautiful. What counts as art? What looks good? What feels good? What sounds good? It blows my mind that, like, I'll just go ahead and say it, right? If you see something, say something. Why would Mike Pence walk out of Hamilton and not understand how incredibly artistic and brilliant that show is, right? Now who knows, right? But maybe it's culture, right? Who knows? But Andy Warhol, versus Van Gogh, graffiti versus right. You watch people like in aesthetics, fashion, art, film, music, etc. Right. So what counts as pleasing? What counts as beautiful? What looks good? What tastes good? How do we know what counts as good cuisine, good film, beautiful music, great music? Like, who decides, right? It's decided collectively, culturally. So a lot of the award shows, they're watered down with the sponsorships and the corporate nature of it, but ultimately they're trying to celebrate aesthetics. And so those are the 5 categories, right? So if you know of a population of people and you want to put a label on that population of people and you want to be able to say, yeah, that is or is not a culture. Well, one way to determine if they're a culture is if they share meaning and value across these 5 categories. Are the materials and artifacts that they hold in high value? Do they have rituals, holidays, and festivals that all members of the population rally around in order? Are they card-carrying members? Do they identify themselves as a this or a that Do they put some identity or label onto themselves to be members of institutions? Do they have terms, phrases, words that they share meaning of that non-members of the population wouldn't understand readily? And do they also share a sense of what is pleasing, what is beautiful when it comes to landscape or architecture or music, film, fashion, etc.? Those are the 5 categories. So, Patty, you opened us up with a great question. I wanted to offer 5 categories, right? This is a checklist. Yep. We share meaning and value across these 5 categories. Unique to us, non-members of the population don't get it. Now you've got a culture. And culture is just one of the things that we bring, one of the bags that we bring when we talk about baggage. We also bring our heredity and we bring our personal past experiences. But culture is a big one, right? So thanks for asking about that. 8:35 p.m., Get a Clue in 52. We are off to a great start. We're talking about tip number 1 in communication. Tip number 1 for the year is checking baggage. Make sure you know what you and others bring to communication.
It's your turn, Charlie.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much, Coach Jeff. Round number 1 in journey number 2 in Get a Clue.
Yeah, here we go.
Yeah. So, again, you got the concrete mixer working very, very early. Thank you very much for that deep dive into culture.
Well, hang on real quick. Let's go ahead and brand this. When we do a deep dive, we call it a Kluba dive. We're Kluba diving.
Exactly. Oh, I forgot that one. It's Kluba diving. What's a deep diving? Yeah, we all bring baggage, but breaking down and Kluba diving into the culture, and it was a good question that Patty also asked.
Always.
So while you were talking, we understand the materials and the artifacts and so forth, so value. Then we get to the belief systems. Okay, celebrations and so forth accepted. The concrete mixer starts going when we come to the social institutions, because it's in these institutions that influence the belief systems as well, whether it be political or otherwise. Language is okay.
Charlie, let me ask you a question. Do you have radio or something playing in your space?
No.
I hear background.
Yeah, I do too. I don't know what it is. Because you're breaking up a little bit as you talk sometimes. And
no, everything remains off here. But Coach Jeff here, Patty was right, you do break off sometimes. I don't know if it's the streaming or your network or something like that. I'm not sure. As then when we get to language, as our great father Nelson Mandela said, if you speak to a man in a foreign language, he hears you. If you speak to him in a language that he understands, he's listening to you. But if you speak to him in his own language, he respects you. So, as a networker, whenever you get to know someone, it's again all these phrases you learn in languages, different languages, in how to maybe greet, what one term means, etc. But now you guys mentioned another term, what was it, filibuster? What does that mean? What does filibuster or filibuster mean?
It looks like Jeff is now frozen.
Frozen again. What does it mean, Patty?
Patty?
A filibuster is a political device where you can prevent a passage of a bill by speaking. If you're in the Senate, I believe. I guess they could do it in Congress too, in the House of Representatives. I'm not sure. But it's complicated because what it means is one person can just grandstand and talk and talk and talk, and then they can take a vote to stop it.
Okay. And then we get to the aesthetics part.
Yeah. It's simple.
Oh, you've gone
No,
frozen
I'm
again.
done. I want to try to just offer something. I wanted to try to offer something simple, which is a political legislation for moving forward.
You've just been frozen to us for quite a while. Jeff.
And you frozen again. But just to keep going,
Interesting.
You
Yeah,
know, when
that's being on you. Not sure.
But I was actually thinking about that. It could be with the stream to YouTube is pretty, bandwidth.
Yeah, now he's gone totally.
Yeah, I think streaming up to YouTube is actually draining or affecting bandwidth or something like that. But Patty, the good thing again now, when we says, how could you leverage? This is a question for you, Coach Jeff. Is how could you leverage, knowing that you are also bringing this bunch of baggage with you, how could you leverage it to get the conversation better in understanding what the other person's baggage is?
That's a great question. First of all, I don't like this is not your fault, right? So what I'm about to say is not a judgment, Charlie. I'm actually grateful that you're bringing this question up, but let's change the language, right? Instead of saying how do I leverage this, it almost sounds like because a lot of people, like in investors, right, they use, you follow, leverage is often a term of how do I get an advantage on somebody else, right? So it's close, you're in the right direction, right? But you never want to, it's not leverage, it's not a power that you have over somebody else, it's a power you have for and with yourself. And the leverage is in patience, the leverage is in compassion, the leverage is in curiosity, the leverage is in, as I mentioned, as I read at the end of the tip, what Stephen Covey says, seek first to understand, then to be understood. Excuse me. Right. So when we know, or when we are made more aware of the fact that everybody shows up to communication with these three bags: culture, heredity, and personal past experience. We know that instead of the insecure person that's constantly trying to get agreement or liking or understanding for their bags, right? We can be patient and be curious and ask questions about other people's bags, right? So, leverage is power. You'll have more power when you're more curious about the other person than you are eager for them to know who you are, all right? Like, I mean, I guess, in my experience, that's really what I have to answer you with. I mean, I'll be honest and say that At many times in my life, I've been insecure. At many times in my life, I've been afraid that I wasn't good enough, or that I didn't know enough, or that I didn't fit in, or that I wasn't welcomed or invited, or what have you. Does that make sense in various situations? I don't, that doesn't bother me as much anymore. But I grew up that way. I came up that way years and years and years. In my behavioral style, I'm a fast-paced, variety oriented, and I know that there was years in my life where I was basically talking too much to try to put stuff out there that I was hoping other people would connect with and bond with, right? And I wish I would have. I wish I knew what I knew now, so that I could go back and, instead of talking and trying to put whatever out there so that people would like me, I wish that I would trade that energy for committing to liking other people and just listening to them instead of promoting myself. And then in the course of liking other people, then they would have a more genuine, natural curiosity about me, rather than me pushing myself into people's faces, right? Which I would do out of insecurity when I was younger. So, and some would argue I do it now. Anyway, I digress. My point is that I think it's more beautiful to be curious about other people than it is to be self-promoting all the time. I think there are times in our lives when we do need to be self-promoting, because the world needs us and our gifts that we have to give to the world. But by and large and overarchingly, I want to remain curious about others. I just think it's better. But some sort of balance there is appropriate.
Yeah, you had quite a bit of a breakaway there. We lost you for a bit there. As you mentioned, from experience, we get into meeting different people and so forth. And what I like to do is always find out what is your favorite foods, like what do you guys like, what those kind of things. And then I basically offer, because now again, going to getting a space where you're getting to understand and getting someone at an ease and more trust is if you get, again, as they say, the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. But at the end of the day, it's also a way to a person's mind, a person's state of relax and so forth when you're sharing a meal. But if you're sharing a meal that he really enjoys and loves, from a cultural perspective, they're more relaxed and they can share with you more. And you tend to connect better.
Yeah, well, there's two things there. Number one is the familiarity, right, versus the growth. Okay, and when you read Get a Clue in 52, in tip number 1, I just got done reading it word for word. I'll encourage you to go back and look at it. But some cultures we're born into, right? Some things we're born into. Mom, dad, and the situation around us, and the neighborhood, and right. And then as we get older, there are other aspects of cultures that we expand into, that we choose. So some cultural beliefs, attitudes, values, ways of doing and being are prescribed to us, and we don't know anything else coming up. Other times just very simply, I can tell you quite honestly, like for me growing up, mom and dad, right? Culture, I grew up in the San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles, right? And culture was TV and movies. That's what it was. So we'd be at like Thanksgiving dinners or not Easter in my family, Passover, or you understand, or Hanukkah or whatever. When we'd get together for birthdays or events or whatever, the conversation around the table was about Ben and J-Lo. It was about who shot JR, on the TV show Dallas. It was about, like, did E.T. really make that bicycle fly? It was like, it was all, it was TV and movies, because we were in LA, we were in the Valley, and it wasn't just like the culture that was fed to us, but it was also industry, right? Because so many people in LA work in TV, and you follow? Does that make
Yes.
sense? And when I moved away to San Diego, and I remember when I came into San Diego, and then I would go back to LA for a family deal or a holiday deal. And I remember when I was shocked, I couldn't believe it. The first time it really hit me, like, oh my God, my family has no idea who they are. Like, nobody in my family knows who anybody in my family is. We all know what happened on TV. We all know what happened in the movies. We all have an opinion on who should have gotten the Oscar or who should have gotten the Grammy, but nobody knows what's going on in each other's lives,
Yeah,
and so
yeah.
I became a bit of a black sheep, when I would come to the dinner table and say, well, tell me how you're doing. And they go, what? I got to talk about me? And anyway, it gets interesting. And I don't know if you're asking a question, Charlie, or just furthering the conversation, but in the book, we talk about culture we're born into versus culture we choose. And I just said a word or two about it. And we can go scuba diving on that too, but there's a difference, right?
Yeah. No, that was pretty cleared up for me.
All right.
Thank you very much, Coach Jeff.
Yes, sir. Well, here we are, 8:51 p.m. in installment number 1, the second edition. I can't believe I'm embarking on the second year. It sounds funny, right? Here's how funny it sounds. Do you know anybody that's done anything for one consecutive Sunday in 2021? Well, this is actually the 53rd consecutive week that I'm reading a tip from the book. Now, tonight's tip, checking baggage, I read it last year. It showed up at a different point in the year. And now we're starting off this year this way in the communication section. And tip number 1 in communication is realize that others are checking baggage, and we need to check baggage when we're entering into communication situations. Other people have a different idea of what looks good, feels good, tastes good, sounds good. Other people have different experiences when it comes to dogs and media and anything else under the sun, politics, etc. And everybody else has different ways of doing, ways of being, etc. I can tell you right now, a very subtle example. My wife had 3 older brothers, 1 younger sister, and aunts and uncles that would come over from the Philippines and stay in the house at the same time. Right? Me, I grew up, it was my brother, my mom, and my dad. Right? So now when her and I come together, what do you think that means when it comes time to household chores and with the way the house is kept and who the house is open to when it comes to visitors and guests, and right? So even another thing I didn't even get into in the book, but just because I know a thing or two about communication and culture, there's a difference between culture and then co-culture. Populations within a larger population, right? So my wife and I, we share values, attitudes, and beliefs because we're both American, we're both Californian, right? Does that make sense? But then co-culture, it shrinks down. Does that make sense? And you say the word co, not sub. A lot of times it's subculture. And I don't say sub because we don't want to think beneath or below. Just because the amount of people may be less doesn't mean the values, attitudes, beliefs are any less important, significant, or righteous, right? So co-culture is a population within a larger population that they themselves share values, attitudes, beliefs, ways of doing and being, whether it's the aesthetics of food, or the rituals around the passing of loved ones or anything else, right? The things that we talked about, values, attitudes, beliefs, ways of doing and being, rituals, festivals, holidays, language, aesthetics, social institutions, materials, and artifacts. These are the things, the icons, the avenues to understand culture. And the idea is this: if you get nothing else from what we're talking about today, just understand this. Open up your mind. There are other people that are showing up to communication with different baggage than what you're showing up with. Like, number 1, you're showing up with baggage. And number 2, other people are showing up with baggage too, and their baggage may be different than yours. So why don't move the communication in a way where you guys can open up bags, see what's in each other's bags, and then adapt your communication for better understandings. And that's what we're talking about here. Rather than communicating from a perspective of assuming everybody's just going to know what you're talking about all the time, to a perspective of curiosity and investigation and compassion and openness and exploration, right? when we really make room in our communication for the diversity of perspectives, values, attitudes, beliefs, ways of doing and being that are out there, we're going to increase our chances as effective communicators, especially if we're doing business, wanting to sell to people. I mean, we're not even into marketing, sales, and networking yet. We're just starting with communication. 8:55 p.m. We're off to a good start. Get a Clue in 52. I'm not even checking other media sources to see if we are in fact streaming. I assume we're streaming live to Facebook. I assume that's not Facebook, YouTube. I assume that's going okay.
I looked up on my phone. You're definitely there.
All right. Well, that means you're there too.
Yeah.
You're there too, as well, Charlie. Any other questions or comments for the first tip and Get a Clue in 52? Patty, I'm so excited that every time I touch this book, you're right there. So cool. Any other questions or comments for tip number 1 in the communication section?
I just picked up another pebble, and I think I got disturbed where my comments or questions was going around when you were breaking back and forth. And one of the little stones that popped out was approaching it with an open mind. And also, we've kind of now getting into a lot of intercultural things, intercultural marriages, and that is where people start to learn about the different cultures. When we go to school, things have just basically changed all over the world. There's no more that cultural segregation as much as it used to be 20, 30 years ago.
And beyond, yeah.
Yeah. There tends to be more of a global community, even within countries itself. The different cultures within a country are tending to be more embracing each other rather than separating each other, and the intercultural interaction is much, much greater. So knowing all these skills and how to approach it, again, I've got to now find the right word. I'm not as good a wordsmith as you are, Coach Jeff. What do you use to really understand in the space that you are when communicating with someone? Again, it would be investigation, curiosity, sharing your experiences within that culture. But more is, again, I wouldn't want to go down the route of first meeting. We'll get into that one when we get to networking or somewhere, or what is the first thing that you're saying to people. But it is all about communication. How are you open to learn more about the other person?
The way you phrase it, it's tough to answer. How are you open? But I think you said it already in prefacing your question. It's the curiosity. You commit to curiosity, and we're going to talk about this later this year when we get into. As a matter of fact, later on in the communication section, we're going to get to overcome a lot, which is the barriers to critical thinking. One of which is, of course, ego defense, and when you can go from defensive to open, it's when you say how, the first thing you have to realize is different isn't better or worse, different isn't right or wrong, different isn't civil or savage, different isn't left or right, blue or red, up or down. Different's just different. But when we come from an ego defensive place, different is a threat. So it's a combination, I would say, of coming to terms and comfort with who we are, and then making a decision to grow, beyond just what we were born into, and then getting curious as to where we want to grow. What do we like and not like?
Love
Is
it.
that fair?
No, I love it. I love the way you actually broke it down. Is not really how do you do this. Again, you
The
get vulnerable.
process.
Yeah, that
Well,
process,
of course.
the
It all
learning,
comes down to
growing,
vulnerability and love. Yeah.
vulnerability and love and compassion, and all these compact into one thing, that the way you approach that line of communication will depend on what value you're going to be bringing to that conversation as well.
Yeah, it's so funny. Like there's such a simple example, like driving in a car with somebody, right? If I'm in the passenger seat and somebody's driving, right? At some point, they're gonna make a driving maneuver that's gonna be different from the driving maneuver I would have made if I were driving.
You just reminded me of my a friend of mine's grandmother.
Everybody you've ever been in a car with, I understand, right? So my point is, right? This mindset is, why did you get in the left-hand lane? Versus, like, don't get in the left-hand lane, go this way, right? Instead of like on the spring-loaded like a mousetrap to make sure everybody does what you would do, it's more like, hey, you want to know what? If I were driving the car right now, I would have gone to the right. I noticed that you've gone to the left. Can you tell me why'd you go to the left? What's going on there? What were you thinking about? Well, invite me into your world. Broaden my horizons by telling me what you were thinking, And just driving in a car is a safe example, but vote this way, vote that way. It gets into heavier situations, but it's not. When you think about it, it's not that hard to say, you know what? I was going to do this. I see you doing that. Now I have a choice to either call you some negative term to make myself feel better, or to be curious about what you're doing and see if I want to do it your way instead. So, right, the degree to which we're more comfortable with ourselves is the degree to which we're comfortable growing, expanding beyond what we know of ourselves. But when we talk about culture, as we have in tip number 1 at Get a Clue in 52, right, bringing baggage, one of the bags that we bring to all communication is culture, personal past experience, and heredity. We get tricked without curiosity. We get tricked without education. We get tricked without compassion. We get tricked into thinking our way is the way, and that's it. And if you look to the problems in the world right now, you'll see that people have violent reactions to anything other than their way of doing or being, instead of a compassionate, right? So it's frustrating in my country, Charlie. I know you're in South Africa, Patty. Jump in anytime. It's frustrating in my country when we see the far left and the far right. And what makes them far? You're just left or you're just right, but you're far left and far right when you consider anything other than you evil, or right, instead of understanding why people feel the way they do. So it's just amazing. And we're going to talk about this when we get to the barriers to critical thinking later on in the communication section. Not off the top of my head, I'm not exactly sure which tip it is, maybe 3, 4, 5. It's coming up in a couple of weeks here, but we'll talk more about ethnocentrism, ego defense, self-interest, all the barriers to critical thinking. We'll talk about all of that. For now, I just want to say, hey, welcome to Get a Clue in 52. The first section is communication. The first thing I want you to know about communication is that you're bringing 3 bags to every instance of communication, and so is everybody else. Heredity, culture, and personal past experience. So that's the tip tonight. And all of these tips are teasers, right? Because we can get deeper. We can go scuba diving on every single one of them. And thanks to people like Patty and Charlie, we do. Thanks for coming on board live tonight. Let me go ahead and make last call. Last call, as we're an hour and 4 minutes now. Get a Clue in 52. Last call for tips, comments, contributions, questions, suggestions, jokes, anecdotes, on and on and on and on and on. for tonight? Tip number one, get it started for 2021.
Well, as
Patty?
complex and numerous as all the baggage is that we bring to anything, the point is to check it, right? And recognize that that is a barrier. So,
Yeah, well, it says, what does the tip say? Like literally verbatim, checking baggage, right?
but I mean, when
Yeah,
Charlie asked
check.
that question about leverage, and you know how you rephrased it, but it's that curiosity is when you check the baggage, right? And then you can be open to learning and growing. So I think it's a great tip, and I love that communication is coming first now.
Yeah, well, thank
Absolutely.
you. I do too. And yeah, I like what you're picking up. This notion of check baggage. When you check your baggage, you don't have to carry it with you. And if you don't carry it with you, you're more open to other people, right? When you're not hanging on your own baggage, it's easier to see other people's bags. And then you can adapt your communication, be more effective, right? But I love that you're focusing your attention on the idea of checking baggage. Like, we all know who we are, so let's put that aside for a moment and let's move into communication, trying to understand who others are. And that's what Stephen Covey taught us when it said, seek first to understand, then to be understood. And perhaps I'm rephrasing it for tip number one, but that's just one part of it. Yeah. All right. What else, Charlie? What do you got for last call?
Not much. Patty just about said it all, and in my roundabout way was basically also saying the same thing. And check it out before. In essence, it's just have an open mind. Just have an open mind. Doesn't matter who it is, who you're speaking to, what their culture is, and so forth. And just be curious to learn about other people as well. And
Yeah.
I think that is maybe gotten me to be connecting with people very, very easily, because it's what I focus on.
We haven't spent a whole lot of time on it, but the subtext of the book is a practical guide to expanding self and business. So
yeah,
we want to check our bags and open our minds to whatever the people are going through, which would expand our awareness of what else is possible in the world for us. So here we are, week number one. Get a clue.
Definitely. Definitely.
And I want to, as always, thank Patty and Charlie for coming on board. You guys were so consistent last year. It looks like we're going to repeat the same thing this year. Let's see. I'm curious what kind of audience we can generate on YouTube. We're in a little bit of an unknown. Like, so much of this is familiar. Go on to Zoom and interact and hang out, but then streaming onto YouTube when I can't see what's going on, it's just a different ball game. I want to see if I can get the Facebook integrated as well. So be patient with me on that. But for now, we're off to a good start. Get a clue in 52. Tip number one of 2021 in the communication section is checking baggage. And there's 3 bags that you bring and we bring to communication: heredity, culture, and personal past experience. When you're aware of your own, cool, you become more aware of yourself. And then the next step is to be curious about others. So you expand your sense of self. And a lot of this culture, heredity is put on you. You know what I mean? And a lot of your past experiences, they're put on you. And certainly a lot of cultural beliefs, they're put on you. And you just got to deal with them. It wasn't your choice. But there's so much more in those categories that are your choice. And when we open our minds to other values, attitudes, beliefs, ways of doing and being, we become better global and cultural citizens. So my wish to you is that you're open-minded when it comes to communication, that when you see or observe things that are different from you, that you get curious rather than defensive, right? And so that you can expand rather than retract, and keep yourself in the ballgame for dynamic interaction, because we all know that that's going to lead to a better life and a better career and a better business. It's dynamic interaction with other people that can help us get where we want to go. And of course, that's to say nothing of helping others get where they want to go. And it's all in there. So Get a Clue in 52 is wrapping itself up. Week number 1 of the year. Tip number 1 from the communication section is checking baggage. It's tip number 1 overall this year. I forget what number it was last year, but I digress. Anything else from Patty or Charlie before we dismiss for tonight? Patty, it's okay if you use last year's book. I know that you'll get your copy soon. I'll go ahead and here we go.
If I can get mine delivered.
Oh my God, it's so much fun. It's so much fun. Watch self from. You guys want to see self romance? This is pretty. Yeah. Oh, that was horrible. Okay, ready? Thank you, Patty. All right. All right. We're gonna go ahead and sign
I'm
off.
always having fun.
Charlie, talk with me privately. I've got 2 different addresses from you, but I don't know which Amazon is the right one for South Africa. Is it do I go Amazon UK or connect with me privately? We'll try to get these sent out to you. Okay. I promise.
Okay, Coach.
Right. I've got 2 different addresses. I got a PO box and then I got another address. But when I go to the marketplace for the United States and try to type in your address and it won't even receive the information the same. I need to go to a different. I've tried. I need to go to a different marketplace. So what's the right Amazon marketplace that will deliver to you?
I'll get that for you. I'll
Yeah.
get that for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. And all right. Anyway, we digress. Let's handle that offline. Patty, are you ready?
Yep, I'm ready.
Oh, here we go. Mwah. Mwah. I love you guys. We'll see you next time. All right.
I have a
Roger.
good week.
Have a good week. As usual,
All right, you
thank you
too.
very much, Coach.
Yes, sir.
Bye-bye.